I mean, I felt really special with that. I was like, man, Guy Swan just saved that story his entire life just to give to us.
Because he did.
Yeah, I think he probably
obviously.
did. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, it was a nice moment. I got to
He was
tell you
like-
guys. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gabe.
Oh, I got props, but go ahead. Not like props, but props.
Let's bust out the props.
All right, I'll bust out the props. So we just had this fundraiser for Operation Bitcoin, and it's over now. We raised some funds and everything. It's a nonprofit that we've got. Natalie, we can probably highlight it a little bit later on. But anyway, we had a fundraiser. We sold some T-shirts, we sold some baseball hats, and all this stuff, and that was all cool. But I was going through my things today, and I found this knit cap that my mom made for me, and I saw her in February, and she's always doing crocheting and things like that, and I said, Mom, you got to make me a Bitcoin beanie, and she did. So I mean, if anybody wants one, I'm thinking about having her make them for me for free, and then we'll sell them to all of our friends. But
I'm very interested, but I'm going to need to see that on you first to really know whether. Oh yeah. Oh man, that's rocking it.
You look like
very life aquatic.
Yes, Bill Murray.
Yes.
You see, you must stay away from the stingray. All right,
I'll tell you what, man.
Everyone's got a Glock.
You can definitely count me in for one in this ball dome. I'll be needing one here in a few months.
I got you covered, literally.
Got it.
Mercy. This is too much fun.
Man. Jeez, it's almost like we've gone 2 weeks without all doing this, and we've got a lot to get off our chest or something.
I think we might be onto something.
Well, I've been looking forward to this one for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Natalie's the bomb. Like, I'm low key a big fan.
Are you sure it's low key?
It's not low key.
Low key actually means high key, apparently, in the lingo. This is what I've learned recently.
Yeah, it's like reverse psychology. It's like reverse psychology or sarcasm, something like that.
I've been using it wrong the entire time. So it's low key, but low key is high key, no cap. Is that how it works?
No
Oh God!
Literally.
Okay. God, literally. I'm not even going to try, man. I'm over 40. I'm just going to accept it. It is what it is, man. It's all right.
Oh, you got cap? I don't even use that. I mean,
yeah. Thanks. I have to. I live around it all the time, man. But but I don't have Riz. I don't have Riz.
I was hoping you weren't going to say that word, dude.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have it, so that's why I'm using it. So, I'm not even sure what it is. I just know it's something that I do not possess, apparently. So, hey, Dr. Nick. Ooh, dropping the
Bitcoin Veterans Boomer Edition.
Right.
Thanks, Nick. You're awesome, bro.
So next week's guest is going to be Dr. Nikamoto.
I've got the secret to being cooler than your kids forever. Just homeschool them. And if you went to public school and were in on that scene back in the day, and now these guys are not at public school ever, you're going to know things about social norms that they're never going to know. And that way they can never be like, oh God, Dad's so out of touch. Like they have no idea.
Shane also has this wall of lockers in his house, and every once in a while he'll just like throw one of his kids in it just to take him back. Get in there,
pick them up.
All these days you think homeschool sucks? Just this is what it would be like if you were in public school.
Today's lesson is this is called a swirly.
Got to raise them up right. A little bit of bullying never hurt anybody. Well, maybe a little bit, but
depends on the bullying.
Yeah, you get over it. I turned out
okay, so I'll vouch for it.
It's a miracle we haven't been kicked off of YouTube yet, for real.
Working on it.
Yeah,
okay, Natalie, that's your objective. We're talking about freedom in America.
Oh yeah, that'll do it.
Easy.
That'll do it. Actually, nowadays, man.
Easy with the F word, man.
It's sad, but it's true.
I'd like to talk about freedom tonight. I think Natalie's a great person to talk about freedom with.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to dork out big time, especially because you say things about the Constitution that I like, and that's one of those things that's near and dear to me. So,
no, it's awesome. If you like order a book on the Constitution, Amazon thinks you're a dad, so just like automatically starts advertising like khakis and loafers to you.
Wait, do they advertise cool brand pants?
That's early onset Republican purchase.
Yeah, exactly.
I might go order a couple of them so I can start seeing those ads.
I think your dad wanted to be like that.
Early onset Republican.
Yeah, King Gillis, man.
Oh, that guy is great. Have you seen him in person, Natalie?
No, I just have watched his special many times.
Natalie is very ready for the mountain.
Yeah.
One of us.
Oh, his sitcom came out today. I just realized his new sitcom on Netflix. Hey guys, I'm not gonna be able to do the show. I gotta go.
It's breaking up.
Just remembered. Sorry, something came up.
Priorities, man, they matter, right?
All right. Before the show starts, I'd encourage everybody out there to go on to Twitter and go and give this thing a share. Bring us
probably do our job, huh?
To hear the amazing Natalie Smolenski. Bring our level of intelligence way up. Sorry, we're gonna bring yours down a little bit, Natalie, but for
the greater good.
Yeah, we got to get this voice out there. We talk a lot about protecting the 12-pound brains and Bitcoin veterans. Like, that's what we're good for. We're good for making sure that we identify those 12-pound brains, and then we make sure that they are protected at all costs. But
we just pull security around them. That's all we do.
Take a knee, face outboard, drink water.
So Shane has this saying: "Smart monkeys, dumb monkeys." And like a lot of dudes, their job is not necessarily to be a smart monkey, but is to protect the smart monkeys.
Division of labor.
Yeah,
that's right. Solidarity.
That's it. I wanted to put it on a T-shirt, but it got shot down by the PR department. I said, maybe that's not the best branding, and I said, okay, I can see that now.
It just wasn't the best branding from the bald white guy.
Yeah.
We need to fire our PR department.
Jordan.
Oh, I didn't know we actually had one. Sorry.
We have a little awkward turtle on that one.
Yeah. Here we go. There we go.
Fire that producer too.
I know that guy's terrible. I vouch for that.
I think everybody's got to go.
Old Salt out there in the audience. What's up, man?
What's up, dude?
Bart.
Jordan, is that a Bitcoin veterans blanket or is that just the flag laying down?
It's the flag, but I mean, you could use it as a blanket.
Blanket would be a cool idea.
That would be. Get on it, Obi. Where you at? I haven't seen him in the chats yet. What a slacker.
He needs to make some snuggies, man.
Oh,
make some whoobies.
Alex got way too excited about snuggies.
No. I wasn't excited about snuggies. I thought of something.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
But when we do Nashville, Natalie, we're going to have this thing called the Bitcoin Veterans Citadel. So Bitcoin Magazine has been kind enough to give us basically a big breakout room. We're going to have stage in there. We're going to have like breakout sessions from like Start 9, so on and so forth. We're going to be doing mesh-tastic sort of clinics and ham radio testing to qualify to be a ham radio operator. And we'll have, we have guys who are prior military, really smart dudes, like who are either former Intel or former cyber warfare guys, or like one of these guys is a former law enforcement officer that his specialty was forensics tracking of blockchain digital related assets. Like if there was a big crime having to do with digital assets, this is one of the guys that would track it down. Like, where did it go? Very good at this kind of stuff. He's going to be doing like a surveil yourself on chain kind of a clinic. Anyway, one of our guys is going to be doing a breakout session called contingency work groups. Have I got that right? With Bill Stebbins. And so the whole idea there is adversarial thinking against what bad things could be brought against Bitcoin. And we want to get some of the smartest people we can find involved in that. So I would love to throw it out an invitation to you, no obligation to be there. But if you can be there, man, you would be a great asset to that thing. It's basically going to be, just workshopping through a bunch of sort of wargaming scenarios, gaming out the way different things can go.
Yeah. No, let's chat about it offline. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Travis was actually on Guy Swan's pod the other day. Did a great
that's right.
job.
Oh, yeah.
That was some good stuff.
Travis West. He is public now, isn't he? So I guess we can say his name.
Well, we
Mhm.
just did.
Yep,
Yeah.
he's out there. There's no going back into that closet, Travis.
I assume it's a fake name anyway. Travis West.
West. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gents, it is that magical time. Hold on to your butts. Bitcoin Veterans is about to start. Welcome to Bitcoin Veterans, everybody. I am Shane Hazel. I'm joined by Gabe, Mike Hobart, Jordan, and Alex. We have a full host crew here tonight. We also have an amazing guest, Natalie Smolenski, which I will do introductions here in a minute. But Bitcoin Veterans is here to put you back on the mission in a world that is extremely nihilistic. And looking at doom lords and doom everywhere, this is the place that is a light, and it's hope, and it is a place where you can find passion in those great ideas that you once upon a time, if you're a veteran, swore an oath to. That idea of freedom that got perverted, the liberty, the self-sufficiency, the independence, and more or less just the self-sovereignty that we were told about as kids. So if that's the mission you're looking for, you found a home here at Bitcoin Veterans, and I think we're going to have a hell of a story for you tonight with Natalie Smolenski. But first, we're going to pay some bills. Alex is going to tell you about one of our amazing sponsors, the KC Cattle Company, also veteran owned, and I got to tell you, they're amazing. But Alex has got the down low on those guys for you.
Okay, cool thing. Right before I do that, though, you literally just had a shipment, Shane, from KC Cattle Company to your house. You had, I don't know, whatever it was, a half beef or whatever.
Yep.
And what is your personal experience with this stuff?
I'm going to tell you, I'm a real big fan of ribeyes, and I love grilling, and so I know meat. I know, weird thing for a guy like me to say, but I love it, and it's one of those things where we had the ribeye on Sunday. The entire family had it, and it was probably one of the best cuts of meat I've ever had in terms of taste, tenderness. The marble was great. I mean, if people don't like fat, you should try one of theirs. It is amazing, unbelievable experience, and the hamburger is great too. Like, everything I've had so far has been outstanding.
Cool. All right. So KC Cattle Company understands power of decentralization and going direct from producer to consumer. They get Bitcoin. They're on Nostr. They're on Twitter. DM them. Tell them that you heard about them on this pod. Say hi. Get to know them. Portion of their sales goes towards helping vets and this pod specifically. They're very based people. We genuinely like these guys. Spent a lot of time talking to them before we agreed to have them involved with the show. And I think our values are very well aligned. For those of you who are in our Bitcoin Veterans chat groups, we have a special discount code to buy beef from KCC using fiat. Contact us for details. They will be having some new discounts buying with Bitcoin only here in the near future as well. Finally, when checking out with Bitcoin, or when you're checking out, add Bitcoin Vets in the notes field at checkout, and you will get a free gift of the world's best tasting Wagyu hot dogs. KCCattleCompany.com.
Still upset, Pat, that I don't have my hot dogs.
You're missing out, because those hot dogs are amazing. They're fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right. Without further ado, I told you guys we had an amazing guest. Natalie Smolenski is here tonight. She founded and leads the Texas Bitcoin Foundation, a public charity dedicated to original research and education about Bitcoin and political economy. Previously, Natalie co-founded the Learning Machine, a SaaS company that built the first Bitcoin-based digital identity wallet and helped the decentralized identity movement. She exited Learning Machine to Hyland, where she currently leads business development. She also co-founded the Texas Blockchain Council, a professional trade association representing the Bitcoin industry in Texas. Natalie is also a political and economic anthropologist developing a theory of value. She writes about Bitcoin policy as a senior fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. I take great pride in saying this. Welcome to the show, Natalie. I think all of us have been, kind of chomping at the bit to have you on the show. And boy, you speak our language. So welcome to Bitcoin Veterans.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely our pleasure. You kind of cause a stir when you get in front of microphones and in front of crowds. The last time that I think it went viral was when you were at the Bitcoin Policy Summit earlier this year, and I'd like to take a second and play about the first 3 minutes of that, if that's okay with everybody, and we'll kind of go from there if that'll work. Get this thing rolling here. There we go.
This damn producer.
I know.
Today, I want to talk to you about peer-to-peer and what that means. The best way to do that is to start small. Let's start from you and me choosing to do something together. It could be anything. Have a conversation, take a walk, share lunch, make a purchase, watch a movie, play a game, start a company. It doesn't matter. What matters is it's you and me together doing something we both want to do simply because we want to do it. You and me, peer to peer. Every great project, every great institution, every great discovery, every great company, every great country begins with a you and a me. There's no one we forgot to ask. There's no one who can give us permission. There is no ID required. There is no third party. There's just you and me. You and me, we, are the basis for what is called civil society. The network of countless yous and me's out there, just doing their own thing, sometimes growing into bigger we's. It is civil society that forms the backbone of the people who give their consent to be governed by any particular government. As the founding fathers of the United States reminded the world, that consent can be revoked. All power belongs to the people, not some of the power, some of the time, but all of the power, all of the time. The people may choose to temporarily delegate some of these powers to a government they consent to, but they can just as easily revoke that consent. The government has no inherent powers, no inherent rights, and certainly no inherent money. All of it comes from the people, and the people can take it back. By doing things peer-to-peer, you and me, just because we want to, we realize one day that, hey, we have power, not because we made a plan to have it, not because we were trying to have it, not because someone gave it to us, but just because we used it. And this is where we arrive at our principle, that peer-to-peer is a human right. Communicating and transacting without a third party in the middle is not an anomaly, it's not suspicious, and it's certainly not a crime. It is the way that human beings have always done things from time immemorial. It's only because of the acceleration of information technologies today that we can even imagine governments, companies, and other third parties trying to get in the middle of every message and every penny that is sent between yous and me's around the world. The founding fathers themselves could not have imagined such a technological future. but they did articulate the principle of peer-to-peer in the Fourth Amendment. Quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
All right, Natalie, you're speaking my language here. I'm the biggest dork on this panel when it comes to the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment being one of the, I don't know, best rights enumerated in the Constitution, and you nail it. You talk about the government having no rights. They have responsibilities. They have powers that are delegated to them by the American citizens. And the peer-to-peer thing, I guess it would be the Ninth Amendment. You know, the right of the people to keep all the other rights outside of anything that is enumerated, like that. You know, one of the last backstops between Ninth and the 10th, peer-to-peer, freedom of association, and you really drove that home in the speech. You know, what was your inspiration behind this?
I think what I wanted to do was remind the world, but particularly Americans, that peer-to-peer is not a crime. There has been a growing push by not just governments around the world, but by sort of centrist political consensus to criminalize direct activity, peer-to-peer activity. And so, because peer-to-peer, much like self-hosted, these are terms that were devised for a digital world. So they seem new. They seem like something unprecedented. But all I was trying to say was everything is peer-to-peer. Like the root of every human society starts with peer-to-peer. And if you criminalize that, if you make that suspicious, then you've destroyed your social fabric.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alex. You gonna say something?
Well, it brings us back to this concept of consent of the governed, right? Where the government derives its power from the will and consent of the people. And if the government tries to create for itself this position of super authority where it says the people no longer can deal with each other, you're no longer free. There is no free market anymore. You have to have our permission for everything that you do, and we're going to watch everything you say and every transaction that you make. And if we don't approve it, then it is somehow criminal or bad in some way. It's mind-blowing, and it completely flips upside down this entire concept of consent of the governed.
Right. No, absolutely. And it's really interesting where we live in a moment where culturally consent is being hyper privileged for interpersonal reactions, particularly in the areas of like sexual politics, cultural politics. But it is then almost just presumed that the state has the right to meddle in any interpersonal interaction. It's almost like that they don't need consent. Like you've already provided consent. Well, hold on, wait a second. No.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I was watching that. I was watching it streamed live while it was happening, and I mean, as soon as you started talking, I was like, this should be completely and totally obvious, But it's so, I mean, it's almost revolutionary just to get in front of a group of people and say those things that you said, which should just be all givens that are a part of any civilized group of individuals, but it's not. And I was just, and I'm sitting there thinking, I wonder what the looks on everyone's faces are in the room right now, because there's, I mean, what kind of reaction did you get, first of all, from the people that were there?
Yeah, I'd say there was an immediate snapping to attention. Like, regardless of whether people agreed or disagreed, they were like, I wasn't expecting to hear this. Okay, let's hear it out. And then about a third of the room got like really excited. And I could see their faces light up. Some of them actually, stood up and clapped afterwards, and a few of them approached me, and they were many of them were from the intelligence community and the defense community, because this was DC, and they were just like, yeah, I believe all of this. These aren't things that maybe we feel like we can say or publicly believe, but there are a lot of people who agree with these things.
Oh, yeah, and I think that I mean, your gift for articulating it very clearly, I think, also spoke to many people, because it's something that so many people kind of feel in the back of their mind, and they just know this isn't how it actually should be.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering from a historical perspective, I mean, what happens to a society that allows this sort of state of existence to develop, the one that we're in right now? How does that happen? And I mean, what examples do we have in history of, I guess, of populations breaking free from this type of intermediation on such a high level?
There's an Italian philosopher, Giorgio Agamben, who he's an anarchist, and he's been variously seen as on the left or on the right, depending on what the issue is. But he writes a lot about the camp as like this paradigm of modernity, how the growing power of the state has begun to concentrate around this paradigm of the camp. And he uses the concentration camp during World War II as sort of the apex of this like full and complete power of the state over the bodies of the people in that situation. You can have all kinds of camps. You can have a camp where the power of the state is fully visible and palpable every second of every day. You're constantly reminded of it. Or you can have a camp where you never see the state. It's almost invisible, and you're just reminded of it when you try to cross a boundary that is not allowed, when you transgress, in effect. And so the problem that we're facing in the digital age is that because information is now free, unconstrained, we can use the state can use the power of information to create these digital camps that then translate into material reality for people. So they impact things like mobility, like your ability to, cross borders, your ability to perhaps get a financial transaction done, to buy a house. Like cash transactions are increasingly becoming illegal. Everything's fully becoming AML KYC'd. Every, demographic, personally identifying, characteristic about people transacting in these digital networks is stored in multiple databases and cross-referenced and correlated to all kinds of other data. And there are, in effect, no restrictions on this. And so the challenge that we have is that, life in the camp can seem very tolerable, but it's like a lobster being boiled in water. Like at some point you start to realize, oh, I'm not going to survive this. But at that point, it's too late. And so the question is, can America be the site of a renewal that breaks some of the invisible chains of the camp? And there's no one right way to do it, but you have to intend to do it. It's a project. It's not going to happen by accident.
Right.
You got to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would suggest that the folks on the other side of the camp, the ones that are constructing this surveillance state, this surveillance society, they have a plan, and they're executing on their plan. So if citizens don't recognize that and come together and unify to say, hey, this ain't okay, then that's a problem, because you've got no plan, and that's not a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. And, there are a lot of, I think, genuinely well-intentioned, patriotic Americans in the the armed services and the intelligence community who see things like disinformation or misinformation as a weapon being waged in a Cold War or a quiet war against the United States by our adversaries. And that necessitates information control. Like, in effect, the US government has to step in and make sure that people aren't being served, inflammatory content by, Russian agents or North Koreans or, Chinese or whatever. The problem, though, is that there's no way to fundamentally differentiate, what information is okay and like what ideas are, essentially adversarial and what ideas are, perhaps true things that are difficult for American society to come to terms with and that are conflictual. And so part of this comes down to, part of a commitment to freedom comes down to having a philosophy of conflict. A free society is a conflicted society, always. The question is, do you have mechanisms for resolving conflict respectfully and peacefully? Because if you don't, that's when violence starts to get involved. And nobody, I think, wants that. But any kind of move toward information control makes violent responses more likely.
Well, and that's kind of part of the paradox, right? Because like that requires communication, but in order to do things peacefully, you have to communicate.
Right.
Because without the communication, you rely on violence and force.
Yeah.
And that's therefore the problem. They're trying to control the communication mechanism. And by controlling the communication mechanism, because it's a slippery slope as far as the definitions of what they're trying to control for, they're effectively hamstringing the capability to allow for a non-violent solution, pushing them closer to a violent outcome.
Right. No, exactly.
Well, to Mike,
and it'd be. Go ahead, Shane.
I was going to say to Mike's point, whenever military operations begin, when we're about to go and do things, right? One of the things that they do is they control the narrative that's coming into the people who are actually about to go fight the war. I remember back in 2003, and then again in 2004, before both deployments, where we were set aside, the communication home was shut off, communication to the news was shut off. Basically, any type of communication we had with the outside world was belt fed to us. Everything was, just intelligence coming in. We were looking at everything that they wanted us to look at. All the time, we've been training to go in and actually fight against normal looking Iraqis or Afghanis or whatever it is, just a guy with a mustache with a gun on targets. And now what you've done is, when you control the information and you control what is acceptable speech and what isn't acceptable speech, now what you've done is you've created a airtight room for othering people. And that's exactly what you have to do to have people look at them and be able to inflict violence on them. Like they have to be looked at as something that's not quite human, and it's
how you increase the pressure. You make it airtight,
right?
But there was one other thing too that I wanted to add on to that, Shane. I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but it's not just from that end either. It's the information and the intel that comes out after the operation is carried out and getting back to the public, right? Because it's filtered in the reports that you guys file. Then it's filtered in reports that go up the chain. Then it's filtered in reports that go to the journalists. Then it's filtered in reports that go from the journalists to the public. So by the time the public gets any idea of what's actually going on the field, it's watered down because nobody wants to find out how many civilians or people are actually getting killed on a day-to-day basis. Like Vietnam taught us that.
Yeah,
right.
This whole concept of controlling for mis or disinformation, that all sounds nice and like a good idea if the government and media had a leg to stand on and hadn't been lying about all these things in the past. Who are they to be a source of what is the proper information? So that ties us back to this is just coming back to control and trying to feed a narrative. And why is all this happening right now? Well, because the people have never been able to connect and communicate on their own better in the history of the world, including not just us here, but talking to an Iranian citizen, talking
Yeah.
to a Ukrainian or a Russian citizen, and realizing like, oh, we don't have anything. Like, we're pretty much on the same page. Like, we hate the people that are above us, that are trying to rule us and dominate us and tax us and all this stuff. Like, wait a minute, maybe they're the enemies. And so you just see all these things like coming together, and it's like, that's really what this is about.
Yeah.
Nat, I had. Sorry, Alex, did you want to go?
Yeah, I want to ask Natalie about something. Talking about these comms protocols and Natalie, you said something in that speech in DC that really blew my mind. I did not know this. You said the U.S. Postal Service on the eve of the revolution was founded partly, maybe even largely, so that revolutionaries could communicate with one another. And the thing that got me thinking about it was like economic activity. This is where we come to Bitcoin. Is a comms protocol. Like all of our transactions as human beings have a lot to do with economic activity nowadays. And the free flow of money and the free flow of the free market is a comms protocol. And it's like, how do you look at all of that? Like the Fed and the way the US dollar is controlled, the whole system basically in my opinion, is a system of control. So how do we move forward from that? Well, like, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah. So, there's no difference in principle from communicating speech and transacting financially. These are modes of relating that are peer-to-peer in essence, and that don't require structurally any third party. Like I don't need a third party to communicate a thought to you. You don't need a third party to communicate a thought to me. And transacting values is the same. Third parties have only arisen in relatively recent human history as trusted custodians for valuable assets to lower the costs of transacting. So they served a purpose, banks, lenders, depository institutions. These are all relatively new social technologies. And so, they served a purpose, and in some cases still serve a purpose of lowering transaction costs of financial transactions. But with technology innovation, there are going to be new technologies that arise that lower those costs even more effectively than these third-party institutions do. So they disrupt. I mean, this is literally just what disruption is. It happens in every area. And so what's perverse is when the state attempts to use the violence of law to mandate that a certain social technology be used, even when it's more expensive now than freely available alternatives. It's not actually sustainable policy. It's not sustainable law. States have tried to make technology innovation illegal since time immemorial, and they might succeed for a time within certain jurisdictions that they have direct control over, but ultimately they always fail. So now I think, the public message to governments is like, you think this is really smart and prudent of you to do, but in fact, it's already failed in advance. You can't do this. The question is just how much violence and bloodshed do you want to create along the way to your own inevitable failure?
Wow. Bingo.
Bam. Cut that one. That's hey, speaking of this, I mean, and you kind of, it's a great segue. You were quoting the Constitution in that speech, and the founding fathers. There's a guy out there that lived in the 1800s that goes by Lysander Spooner, and I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he has a really famous quote that says, "But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist." And today's environment, we look back and, the Fourth Amendment is a great one to look at these days because of privacy concerns. And we realize just how far this government has drifted away from its Constitution. And it's obviously sad for the American people. But where do you see this heading in the future in terms of, what would you like to see? What do you think? The decentralization aspect of Bitcoin is going to drive the United States to. Just any thoughts on where we're headed?
Yeah. So the contest between state and society is a contest of power, and the only way that the power of the state can be checked is through the power of society, of civil society. So the people have to hold the state to account. The state has to be actually afraid of the power of the people. And, it will never police itself. It will never constrain its own power. So the Constitution is an amazing document because it provides certain objective standards for how the state should behave. Now, whether it actually behaves that way in actual practice is up to the people. The people have to punish governing officials electorally or legally or financially or otherwise for violating the Constitution. And that is where the accountability mechanism has been broken in the US. It's unclear if it can be restored. And I think where it is restored, it'll have to be restored locally. So starting with local communities and states. Like, can we do this in the States? And that then sets the precedent for accountability at the federal level.
Yeah, totally agree with that. By the way, doing it locally, the power and the authority is already there locally. Yeah. I mean, there are elected sheriffs in every county in the entire United States of America. Maybe not in DC, because that's like a different thing altogether. But anyone who's in any state in the United States of America, the sheriffs there have full authority to arrest anybody who's breaking the law. So some interesting things going on there. I've heard a lot of guys out there talking about this as a potential remedy for what appears to be a justice system that might be off the rails a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and just talking about local office, there are so many positions in local government that are just empty. They're just vacant because nobody has heard of them. And, the people who have heard of them don't really want them. They don't seem very glamorous. They're not paid or paid very much. It just seems like additional work, but literally like that's the mechanism of self-government. Is all the petty day-to-day stuff. And the problem is when people abdicate government at the local level, what happens is that the federal level swoops in to fill the vacuum and starts to do things that are perhaps beyond its purview. And so this is actually, I think the wider social transformation that America is living through is that the fabric of our civil society has frayed. People move around a lot. People are increasingly isolated. They switch jobs. There are culture wars that, divide people and separate them. And so we don't have the same kind of civil society organizations, clubs, associations, religious organizations, whatever, that used to knit communities together. And so more and more people have been focused on the federal government. But, a century ago in America, like few Americans ever thought about the federal government. Like it just wasn't a part of people's day-to-day lives. So the challenge is, can we survive these cultural shifts and this information bomb, that is the global internet? Can we come out on the other side of that a stronger society?
If you guys don't mind, Nat, I wanted to ask you as far as like what, so you're an anthropologist with significant interest in government and the Constitution. What came first? was it the Constitution and like government that like took you to anthropology, or was it anthropology kind of brought you here to talking about freedom and everything?
You know, I think I was always just interested in people. And when I was younger, I actually wanted to be a journalist because I wanted to I wanted to say true things in public. I wanted to expose wrongdoing and bring people to justice, and also just highlight interesting stories. But this is probably going to be interesting for you guys. The area in which I was interested in journalism was the Middle East. So I lived in Egypt like during peak war on terror, like 05, 06, 07, 08. And the problem with trying to be a journalist in the Middle East in that era is that everyone just wanted to send you to wars, which was not where I wanted to go. So I had to figure out something else to do with my life. And I kind of aligned on anthropology and history. I was very interested in this question of how value is organized in society. So like, what does value mean? What do people mean when they talk about values? So I did anthropology of religion. I wrote about that for a little while. And so then, the question of money, of monetary value, kind of fell really neatly into that.
And you just dovetailed into the next question, which I think was pretty obvious, is like, what brought you to Bitcoin?
Yeah. So that was very unintentional, actually.
As it usually is.
Yeah. I was working at a software startup at the time, selling education technology. So we were selling admissions systems. So like if, you or anyone you know has ever used the Common App to apply for college, like you probably used our software as part of the process. And one of our customers was MIT. They used our software, and their admissions office was really concerned about the problem of fraud in academic records. Like they get tens of thousands of applications every year from all over the world. And a lot of people just like, they Photoshop their transcripts, or like they create fake diplomas or whatever. And then a lot of people say they went to MIT who never went to MIT. And so we actually partnered with their media lab in 2015 to use this new technology, Bitcoin, as a immutable anchor of trust for academic records like diplomas and transcripts. So you can anchor digital documents to Bitcoin. We devised a technical method to do this, and set up something called the Credentials Community Group at the W3C, which is kind of the global body for internet standards, for World Wide Web technology standards. So that has now become, those standards have now become verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers. And so this is the decentralized identity movement that has sort of piggybacked on the decentralized money movement. Because once you solve the Byzantine generals problem for money, you can also solve it for identity. So now, you can self-custody money, you can self-custody your digital identity too.
That's awesome. Hey, could you talk a little bit more on that? That was actually a question that I had. Was, I mean, what is the implementation of digital identity? These new digital identity innovations. What does that look like for the rest of us, I guess?
Today it looks in many different ways. So there are lots of companies working in this space who have built like digital identity wallets. There are open source projects that have done that. We haven't yet gotten to the like self-sovereign identity implementation that's truly going mainstream. That's like, becoming the new, let's say, TCP/IP, protocol for identity. There are a lot of really smart people working on this problem, but adoption has been relatively slow because the digital identity providers that exist today are all centralized entities that profit off of it in some way. So they're monetizing your identity information, selling it, and some of their biggest customers are governments because they want this data for control reasons, not for profit reasons. And so there is a kind of nexus of interests between digital identity companies and government to keep digital identity centralized and fully surveillable. And a lot of what is called like privacy legislation actually, has these immense carve outs for government surveillance. Like it's never governments that are constrained in any way. And so, much like with self-sovereign money, the powers that be do not want self-sovereign identity. And so it's going to have to be bottom-up adoption. Like people are going to just have to start using it. But that's hard, messy. There's not a lot of profit motive to get into that. And so, companies aren't as incentivized to do it. So it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how that unfolds. And I think a big part of it, as with so many other things that are the most important, it's helping people to understand the value of it. Because people are it's like we talked about earlier with your presentation that we highlighted before. It's so many of these things should just be obvious, but they're not. And when we hear all this legislation that government is enacting, and it's always, for your safety, it's always for our good, but it's never for our safety, and it's never for our good. And it's always to give them more power and to take more power away from us. So that'll be an interesting element of this continuing battle to see. Thanks for going into that with me.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean to keep the conversation about this one specific speech, but it was a really, really great speech. And Natalie, you had mentioned a kind of aspect of like, I can't remember the exact wording that you used, but something like a modern underground railroad.
Yeah.
How do you see that playing out? And we've kind of tickled my Doom Lord underbelly a little bit. And so if you don't mind going into the doominess aspect that requires the Underground Railroad, I would particularly appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, the counterweight to the power of the state is the power of the people, the power of society. But the people can't exert their power if they don't have what Killer Mike calls a place to plot.
Yeah.
And so where are you going to plot from? Well, you're not going to plot from anywhere that's surveilled. You need a quote unquote dark forest. You need a place that you can't be seen. And this is what everyone's trying to equate with criminality. It's not. This is the basis of sovereignty. And so I'll give you an historical example. Like after the Black Plague decimated populations in Asia and Europe, that had real political effects based on whether the quote unquote lower classes, the peasants in effect and small merchants were able to then exercise a kind of newfound political power. So England was a really interesting example because in the mass death that happened, it culled the labor force. And so workers were able to demand higher wages and more political rights. But a big part of their ability to demand that was that they could flee to the forests and set up bases of operations that, didn't have the castle or the bishop observing them. And so like the legend of Robin Hood, in Sherwood Forest, is kind of come down to us as like he takes from the rich and gives to the poor. And, some people see that as almost like a socialist thing. Well, it wasn't about any kind of socialist redistribution. It was like generally taking back money, valuables, assets that the aristocracy and the clergy had stolen previously from the people. This was a system where, there was no equality before the law. It was a full class system. And so the law didn't apply to aristocracy and clergy in the same way that it applied to peasants. And so basically, and there were no banks in this era. I mean, if you were a middle-class knight, let's say, you entrusted some of your wealth to the local abbot and he just stole it, you were kind of shit out of luck. Like that, there wasn't a justice system that you could call on to restore your property to you. And so, you might bring in a guy like Robin Hood and his merry men to fix some stuff for you. And so in many ways, it was akin to like the people in Lebanon going to banks with like guns and literally being like, give me my money. So there was a place to plot. You contrast that to a country like Egypt, which has a very narrow strip of arable land around the Nile, and there wasn't anywhere the peasants could escape. And so post Black Plague, Egyptian society actually became much more authoritarian. There were fewer opportunities to resist tyranny. And so it took a very different political trajectory. And so, this is just an example to show it's not about deciding like, are you on the side of Robin Hood or are you on the side of, the bishop or whatever, or the prince? It's about checking power, balance of power. Is this power accountable to anyone? And ultimately, what holds it accountable? The violence of the people. So that's that.
I think it's great that you brought up Killer Mike in that aspect. If you guys aren't familiar with Killer Mike, there's one speech that he's done where he's standing in front of a crowd and basically talking about revolution. And he asks questions. It's that Socratic method where he's like, do you know how to grow vegetables? Do you know how to hunt? Do you know how to defend yourself with weapons? Do you know how to butcher and process your own kills? Do you know how to generate power or get fresh water? All those things that we talk about. Everybody's like, oh, independence in America. Yeah, we're independent, but you're not. Most people they're so heavily reliant on some form of the government in the state, and they don't really understand that independence is a verb that you have to do on a daily basis. And that, even if you can do that well by yourself, we were talking about this before the show a little bit. We were talking about, and I think Alex brought it up, is that this, even if you can do a lot of this, you still need a community that can do this. You have to be able to foster and grow those ideas in the communities that you're setting up. Here at Bitcoin Veterans, if you're new to the show, you may not know, but we run a group that's talking about citadels, and this is open for veterans, veteran adjacent, and civilians alike. This is about being that preemptive step in, going back and saying, oh no, hey, actually, we are the people and we are the power, and we're trying to get our house in order. Well, we're building these organizations. That Citadel organization, if you're interested in something like that, where you want to reach out and start getting plugged in, maybe you're not in an area that has one and you want to start your own, reach out to us. Get in touch with us through Bitcoin Veterans on Twitter or YouTube or any of those things, and we'll plug you into this group.
Natalie, what you were saying earlier about like having a place to plot kind of made me think. I want to say it was James C. Scott. I think he has a book about like his theory is basically like people are running to the mountains to like get away, where a lot of historians will look at it more like, oh, people have slowly been coming out of like the woodwork to like make cities bigger. And he kind of flips that on his head. And it kind of makes me, I wonder if you've done any like research on this or have read anything about it. Like I could almost see that is how the world even got populated to begin with, is like these city centers just became almost tyrannical and people just left them. And then over time, slowly centralized and continue to like have to leave. And maybe that's even why like America has ended up being one of the more freer places, because we had these places to like move to. I wonder if if you have any background on that or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, freedom of exit is a critical way that people can check the abuse of power. So, I mean, if you're being abused or oppressed in any context, there's fight and flight. And so you can choose to fight, but if you're extremely outnumbered, that may not be the most prudent path forward. And so flight may actually be the more rational choice. And, a sovereign or an abuser who doesn't have anyone to lord over just gets sort of deflated. So this is why oppressors always try to block the exits, and why the power of exit is so very important as a constitutive element of human liberty.
It kind of makes you realize like how important it is to have some of these like online spaces, whether it's end-to-end encryption or things like Nostr that can't be censored, like because we're kind of running out of places to flee to. But it also kind of like everything you just described just kind of tells you like the truly peaceful nature of most people. Like you have the option of fight or flight. Most people will take the peaceful option of like, I will just leave because I want to be left alone and I'll just go do my thing over here. But it does kind of make you wonder, like we're running out of spaces to flee to, and people, it's like they're actively gonna like wherever you go, we're gonna go and mess with you. And it makes you a little worried that at some point we could have the fight thing. And we talk a lot here about doing things peacefully because most of us here in our community, we've seen war firsthand, and we all understand more than a lot of people that that's not a road you want to go down. But it almost seems like they're just going to keep pushing us towards that. And maybe that's even their objective. That way they have more of a reason to clamp down.
Yeah, I mean, having a frontier is really critical. Generally, the frontier is the area where experimentation, innovation, even of new political forms can occur. A few years ago, Hester Peirce, who's an SEC commissioner, gave a speech about the importance of the frontier for American innovation. That's one of the best speeches I've ever read by a sitting government official. And I'm just baffled that she hasn't been appointed chair of the SEC yet. But it's worth reading because it's precisely about this. It's like, there have to be areas where the legal jurisdiction of the state hasn't fully penetrated yet, so that there can be the generative forms that give rise to the next order. And, of course, there's some overlap with criminality, but that is a risk that is necessary for the flourishing of human societies. And it is not, there's nothing, in itself criminal about a frontier. And so this is the problem, is we now have this presupposition culturally that governance is needed everywhere. Well, that may be, literally shooting ourselves in the foot.
The assumption there is that unless the government approves of what you're doing, it's probably criminal activity. And the crazy part about all of this is that, like, if you go back to how this country started, right? It was some dudes that got together and basically were like, we are done with this totalitarian regime. We are done with having these dudes infringe on our freedoms. We are done with overtaxation without representation. We are done with all this crap. And nowadays, as it was back then, the government of the time would probably declare a group of people who were acting like that as terrorists, as insurgents, as the bad guys, right? They would try to criminalize the activity. But the reality is, those are the people who are actually just saying, hey, I just want to be free. How about you stop fucking with us?
Yeah, people don't realize this because, you know, now every historical figure is like coded, you know, conservative or coded liberal. But like Adam Smith was actually like a real radical for his time. And one of the things that he argued was that Great Britain needed to just abandon its colonies. And you know, he framed it in a pragmatic way for the British state. He was basically like, you know, every colony we take on creates massive expense side for the British Crown, because we now have to fully provide for the defense of those colonies, and they don't generate enough economic value to offset that. So, you know, very similar to some of the arguments happening today about American empire. You know, he was also fully anti-slavery on, you know, principle grounds. He was just like the slave, or the practice of slavery is, you know, absolutely antithetical to, you know, values of human freedom. And so, but these things always have to be fought for, because there is a convenient slipping into tyranny. There's a convenient slipping into slavery. You know, if you're not really thinking about it, these things become the defaults. There's a reason that, you know, for most of human history, you know, we had autocrats and stratified class societies, and, you know, underclasses and overclasses and legal privileges. It's like this stuff just grows up. It just accretes. And so you have to have a principled, radical point of view to cut through that stuff.
Yeah. And if you look at like to paraphrase what some of these guys were saying, the founding guys, the guys that were that fought through the revolution, the guys that basically made it so we could have a roadmap of freedom, like yeah, basically they were saying is like every generation you have to fight for it. And if there is a generation that doesn't fight for it, you're going to lose it. So
facts.
Natalie, you go ahead, Alex. If you had more, keep going.
Yeah, there's just the last point is that, I mean, we've been going for a little while now. I want to talk a little bit about, Natalie, if you have some ideas on, like, is Bitcoin the frontier? Like, what are the pathways to staving off a bad scenario? Like, there are a lot of folks, you know, sort of in the Bitcoin ecosystem who talk about this potential totalitarian surveillance police state. And like, you don't even have to be too much of a conspiracy theorist to look at what's going on nowadays and go, man, that's a plausible possibility. Like, what the hell do we do? So is Bitcoin that frontier, and is this possibly a way to address some of these issues?
Can I add on one thing to that? Because you're actually asking a similar thing that I was going to ask Natalie as well. And Natalie, you can answer all of this, I'm pretty sure, in just one response. How do you see America going currently? And like, what's the future going to look like? And then leading into Alex's point.
Yeah. So I think Bitcoin is a frontier, but less and less so. Frontiers are always temporary. You know, they're literally a moving edge. And so what was the frontier in 1780, you know, was not the frontier in 1850, is not the frontier definitely today. And so, you know, much in the same way that liberty must be continually fought for, the new frontier must be continually sought out. So Bitcoin will be a frontier of self-sovereign financial transacting as long as it can be. And then there will be something else, or Bitcoin will have evolved into something else. So it never ends. It's always, you know, there's a book that I like to cite called The Crypto Wars, which is actually it's written by a former UK spook on attempts by governments, especially the US and the UK, to break encryption. Which has always been the goal. Like, governments from the moment that cryptography was discovered, you know, in ancient times, there's always been attempts by the state to break it. And that continues. So this is the constant ratcheting up of civil society, the power of civil society meeting the power of the state. And that creates the corridor of liberty.
That's awesome. So I got a question for you. I always like to try to find something that we can take action on. Us in here in our larger, I mean, there are a lot of Bitcoin veterans that are growing in numbers every single day, and we're getting involved because this is a mission oriented movement. And I know that we've talked a little bit about getting involved at the local governmental level, but I mean, you've got an opportunity right now to talk to hundreds and hundreds of military veterans that are here to get shit done, to get involved. What would you say to a group of individuals like that on how they can act to push things forward so we can avoid the things that we don't want to see that have the potential for getting nasty in the streets? What can the individual person do? And what can we do as a group of a bunch of badasses that are here to make good things happen?
Yeah, I would say that veterans have an extraordinary amount of power symbolically in American civil and political society. Something hits different when it's coming from a veteran. And politicians, none of them want to be seen disparaging or in any way speaking ill of veterans. And so your voices are actually extremely powerful. So exit is one way to use your liberties, but voice is another way. It's a way of fighting, but fighting with words and, ultimately through persuasion, which is what democracy, the marketplace of ideas, are all about. And so, I think the viability of American democracy is absolutely contingent on us creating a sustainable military presence in the world. I think we've so overextended ourselves that we've made so many promises to, allies, to, secret coalitions, to, assets, to whoever, that we have not been able to keep. And when you do that, you just crater trust. And, as General James Mattis said in 2019, a nation that has no allies withers. So America actually has to rebuild its posture in the world by creating allies once again. And that's going to be a generational process, because basically this incumbent political generation has destroyed it. I mean, even our allies are not really allies anymore. And that puts American lives at risk, both servicemen and women internationally and domestically. I mean, it's made us targets for a lot of people who most Americans don't know anything about. They've never heard of them, but they're going to be the ones to die in the next 9/11. And so I think military, active military and veterans have a major role to play in saying, hey, let's actually have strategic goals that are achievable. Stop giving us these like wild goose chase missions where there's no definition of victory. There's no, sense for who's on our side, who the enemy really is, like what we're solving for, like containment, projection of power. These are not strategies. Those are ruses that elites use to maintain their own power. If someone is going to risk their life and potentially die for something, like let's make it very clear what that is. This is why the founding fathers said it is the Congress that can declare war. The president cannot do that. Nobody can do that unilaterally. The American people have to be bought into that. And we have to take that power back.
Speaking of that, we had President Trump come out this past week, and as the populist he is, and say, yeah, we'll take payments in Bitcoin for the campaign, right? And we just saw the House you just sit there and pass, or at least just in the House, where they passed the motion, I guess, to not allow CBDCs to become law here in the United States. As more and more billionaires and millionaires in Bitcoin start moving their power into politics, how do you see this going? Do you see that maybe we're on that slope now where we're going to start seeing some major things, obviously, at the states? I've heard the term, or at least the colloquialism lately, that Bitcoin is the new weed, where states are going to start saying, yeah, you know what, this is the way we're going to go. We're not going to go the CBDC route. How do you see this all, kind of shifting in our favor here with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm happy anti-CBDC legislation passed, but there's a lot of duplicity in the politicians who are passing stuff like this, and then on the other hand, voting to reauthorize Section 702 of FISA, which basically just fully undercuts the Fourth Amendment. So it's surveillance when we want it, and no surveillance on paper to get reelected. So that's kind of on the surveillance side. On the Bitcoin side, there is no reason that there shouldn't be free currency competition in the United States. And this is something that a lot of state actors want to prevent because they, want to shore up the dominance of the US dollar. But the thing that makes a population's wealth and savings resilient over time is diversification. Currency collapse is a catastrophe for ordinary people. And so being able to hold your wealth in other kinds of money other than the national currency can be the reason that people remain solvent or minimally able to survive. So, Argentina is doing this right now. For example, Milei basically passed an executive order saying that contracts in any currency will be legally honored in Argentina, even if they're not in the official legal tender. And so he's trying to reintroduce this currency competition, which is what Hayek called for in the denationalization of money. So I think that's actually a place to start. It's not in the Overton window yet, but I think there are some politicians who could come around to it.
So do you think today or whenever it was that when we had this anti-CBDC vote in the House that's mostly controlled by Republicans, do you think this was mostly for show, knowing that it was going to go over to the Senate and die?
Yeah, I think this Congress doesn't do anything that's not for show, unfortunately.
100%.
Oh yeah, it's all theater. All
Yeah,
theater. And I'm glad. It was good to hear you.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that it no longer functions as a deliberative body. So Congress was designed to be the place where ideas could be debated and laws could be debated. That no longer happens. Yeah. Now it's all backroom machinations, and the actual statute that matters is shoved into these huge multi-trillion-dollar omnibus spending bills that most people in Congress don't even have the opportunity to read before they have to vote on them.
Nor do they, at the end of the day, do they really care is the question. Because if they really cared about it, they could pass a law that basically says you cannot pass a bill that has more than 10 pages or whatever the hell it is, right? So it makes a guy wonder, what are they really doing there? Do they actually want to read those bills, or are they more interested in essentially looting the middle class of America? I don't know.
I think you answered your own question there, bud.
Just an idea. Who knows?
Well, just the very fact of how rich members of Congress are getting during their time of service. They're not like coming into Congress wealthy, but they're sure leaving Congress wealthy. And that's new. Like,
how do you explain? Yeah. How do you explain that?
The people who make the laws also trade equities. And so it's like, you know, is it insider trading? If you are the sovereign making the law, that then moves the market. Like, you're the ultimate insider. And it's perverse incentives because, you know, I think members of Congress would vote to make that illegal for themselves if they knew all their other colleagues were going to do it. But because the majority of their colleagues aren't going to do it, they're not going to do it either.
Be that sore thumb. I think we know what time it is. You guys ready? Natalie?
Oh, yeah.
We warned you in the beginning. It is, we're getting to be that time.
Oh my goodness. Is it that time?
Right. It's story time.
Fucking comedian, private joker.
All right. It is story time, Natalie. I hope you've taken this time over the last hour, 15 minutes or so to really give us something, you know, nice and juicy and hilarious here. We're all waiting on bated breath.
No pressure.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the story of how I did not end up in the CIA. Because I was in Egypt, you know, learning Arabic, height of the war on terror. I was actually, what's cool about studying Arabic in that era is it was very ideologically diverse. You had a lot of active duty military, you had intelligence people who you suspected were intelligence. Then you had like professors of like medieval Islamic history and like modern professors of like Arabic literature who were all Marxists, and like, so it was this really interesting kind of ideological cauldron. But, you know, CIA recruited everywhere in every Arabic language program. So they came around, you know, and the guy was super nice. And they basically, you know, the entry level job for Arabic speakers was like something they probably have like ChatGPT doing today, which is just like reading Arabic language media and like summarizing it, you know, sending these like briefs every day up the chain. And I was like, I don't know. It sounds really boring. But the funny story is that, you know, at that time, I don't know if this is still the case, but the CIA had this absolute drug-free policy. Like, and I had just happened to smoke weed like within the past 6 months before this recruitment interview. So he was like, we can't take you. And I was like, you know, I think it's probably better for Natalie Smolenski and for the CIA that I did not end up in the CIA.
That's great. Get me on that top secret clearance. Sorry.
So you're saying the devil's lettuce saved you from becoming a spook.
That's right. That's right. Which interestingly didn't prevent everyone in Egypt from thinking I was CIA. But I actually genuinely wasn't.
Laying it on a little thick there, Natalie. Okay, we get it. You're not in the CIA. We get it. Okay.
Your secret
At all.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Oh man.
Weed'll never do anything good for you people. Remember that. Except keep you out of the three-letter agencies, at least on their side of it.
The CIA could probably stand to use some people that are smoking and like.
And they all need to do like just a Joint Chiefs meeting over there.
Joint Chiefs. Oh, beautiful.
420.
Well,
I mean, those guys.
They've got the guys playing with LSD and doing all the remote viewing and everything, so they're clearly not afraid of touching some illicit substances.
That's right. That's right. You know, if it can be weaponized.
That's the problem with it just makes everybody so peaceful. We can't allow that.
That's right.
Start
Exactly.
thinking for yourself. Oh no, we can't have those people in our ranks. You just got to swallow everything we give to you.
Yeah, that is a good point. God forbid, like their agents start actually smoking. They're like, wait, I thought we were supposed to be perpetuating freedom and peace. They're like, get out.
Right.
We won't have any of that around here. And I knew there was some. I thought I picked up on a Bob Marley reference in your DC presentation when you said that all of the power belongs to the people all of the time, not some of the power some of the time. And I was like, is that a Bob Marley reference? And yes, it was. Thank you for the confirmation.
Nice. That was actually not intentional. I'm not very cool, but thank you for that.
Well, I think our 10,000 live streaming viewers right now would tend to disagree with that, especially now that we know that you couldn't join the CIA because you were smoking herbs. So that's pretty damn cool, if you ask me.
I was about to lay some compliments on you, Natalie. Like, hey, what you're doing for reshaping this ridiculous feminist movement that's out there for like my little girl, and a bunch of us have little girls on the show and in this crowd, like amazing. The fact that you've smoked weed and are open about that, and it didn't get you into the CIA, you just took it another level in my house. Like I could sit here and tell my little girl and be like, hey, look, here's your superhero over here, like this.
Yeah. That's amazing. No, I mean, I think at the end of the day, any ism, like any movement for human liberation, is either about liberation of all of us or none of us. There was this slogan, my family's Polish, in the 19th century in Poland, when, that country was fighting for its independence, that people would hold up this banner that said, for my freedom and yours. I'm fighting for my freedom and yours. And so there were a lot of like crazy Polish radicals who went and fought in like every revolution around the world, including the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, like lots of revolutions. And so this is the thing, like if you genuinely believe in human liberty, these identity positions are always secondary to your humanity.
Absolutely. Dang.
You're on mute, Shane.
Yeah, I know.
But whatever you said, I bet it was awesome.
It was great. You guys missed it. I was just gonna say there's so many good cuts, mic drop moments here tonight, and I want to really thank you. I mean, we're getting into a little after quarter now, and I want to make sure that everybody has a round where they say whatever they need to say before we wrap this thing up tonight.
All I will say is that Natalie, I am very appreciative of your appreciation for freedom. Like, kind of dovetailing off what Shane said, there's not a whole lot of females that are arguing the points that you're arguing. And I'm not necessarily going down the whole, we need more women in Bitcoin. Like, we'll get the good women in Bitcoin that like we deserve and we need. Like, we don't need to just push the female sex into Bitcoin just for the sake of some DEI ridiculousness. But like the fact that you like are one of those voices just naturally on your own, like I particularly really appreciate, because it just allows the message to get delivered to a lot of people that like guys like us, like Shane that's a crayon eater, and like I'm just a dumb army grunt, like we're not going to be able to get across to a lot of like people that you'll be able to get across to. So I'm glad you're here with us.
Thank you.
The important thing about diversity in Bitcoin is just to have more people able to sell what Bitcoin is or freedom in general to different people that maybe their heart is a little hard against hearing something from somebody that's not like them. So if like that does help, cool. I'll take the diversity in that sense.
Yeah. No, I think it has become like a right coded word. Like, guys, it's the basis for everything you hope for your life and the lives of those you love. And so, yeah, thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in, I guess. I heard a rumor that you're a fan of war movies. Is that correct?
Yeah, I love a good war movie.
What's your favorite war movie? I'm just curious.
I would probably say the Battle for Sevastopol. It's the story of the Ukrainian sniper Yudmila Pavlichenko, and she's one of the most successful snipers of all time. 309 Nazi kills in the Second World War. She was known as Lady Death. I mean, she literally would just like, you know, like piss and shit and, you know, snow and like heat until the target manifested. And so like she's truly incredible. Friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. She came to the United States many times was honored. And really, you know, it's this path not taken of like Soviet American friendship. Doesn't mean we have to agree. It doesn't mean we have to have the same political system, but we did something important together. And we could have chosen to celebrate that. So yeah, I love that movie.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, and thank you for being here. I'm so glad that we were able to come on and to talk with us today. It's you know, I've heard a lot of your presentations and your speeches, and I find it to be extremely inspiring. And you're doing great work out there. So thanks for being here and hanging out with us tonight. And yeah, just keep on doing what you're doing because you're making it work.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I loved it.
Alex.
Only comment I have is just thanks for being here, Natalie. Big fan, as you know. I think you're probably one of the smartest people we have in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Really appreciate what you're doing and the work that you do. So thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jordan. You got
I do have one thing that I wanted to get in earlier because at the beginning, kind of before we went live, we were talking books and stuff. What are you currently reading, and what is one of your like either favorite or most like pivotal books?
Oh wow. So pivotal books. Yeah. So I've actually done a lot of research in psychology and psychoanalysis. And there's a book called The Abyss of Madness that changed my life. It's by a psychoanalyst named George Atwood. And he writes about, you know, what we often call mental illnesses or psychopathologies as effects of particular types of trauma, and people working to make meaning of that trauma and make meaning of their lives in light of that trauma. He writes in a very accessible way. It's all based on clinical work with his patients. And I would say that book really changed my life. What I'm reading now, I'm reading a lot of like philosophy stuff. Like there's a school of philosophy called phenomenology. So I'm reading some like heavy technical stuff in that because I actually think that the direction we're going in AI requires us to have a scientific account of consciousness and of the subject. And candidly, neuroscience and cognitive science, like they're not going to cut it. They don't actually ask and answer some of the fundamental questions about the constitution of subjectivity. So that's more on the science side.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Speaking our language here, Natalie. I've got so many thoughts in my head right now. One being with the Bitcoin Policy Institute, I would say, especially because of what you kind of kicked loose in my mind, is veterans do have a very asymmetric voice in this fight against DC. If we can lend our voice, I know I'm speaking for myself. I don't, I'm not obligating anybody here at Bitcoin Veterans, but I'm sure there's a host of us that would love to show up on the steps anywhere in that place where we had an audience to lend our voice to this as a shield, or now let's just say a metaphorical, peaceful assault to say, hey, listen, we're all in agreement on this kind of stuff. And if you're anti this, you're anti-veteran. I think that would be a hell of a path forward to kind of give this thing a little bit more firepower if we can. And, if that's not something that maybe we can work with the Bitcoin Policy Institute on, maybe that's something that, guys, we need to start looking at internally to Bitcoin veterans, is putting together a policy group and starting to interact on this on a much bigger stage, because obviously, looking at the viewership tonight, we're starting to get those numbers, and that's going to cascade, I think, into some really, plausible events for Bitcoin veterans to be involved in that space. The next thing I wanted to kind of just hit on here for a second is just to say thank you for your work in this this atmosphere, this industry that we're in, this message, this mission that we're on. This is huge, and you talk about a community that needs great voices out there talking about freedom and liberty and calling to attention some of the atrocities and our rights. Thank you for doing that and being with us here tonight. It's been a real honor to get to know you and hear some of your stories and see some of the work that you've done. Just absolutely commendable on every front that we've seen. So thank you so much for your time, your dedication. And thank you for being, like I said, a great role model, not only for the little ones out there, but for this community in general. I think you set the bar extremely high for people who are going to come into this space and contribute. And that's what I think this time demands, is a extremely high bar for making contributions, because, let's face it, what's been done in the past has not got it done. So anybody else, and I think we'll wrap it up. If you want to get in touch with Bitcoin veterans or Natalie, we'll have links in the show notes. You can get in touch with us. You can get involved with Operation Bitcoin. It is Gabe is leading that. It's a 501c3 that's taking veterans and guys that are transitioning out of the military and finding them real jobs in the Bitcoin industry. We've got Brave, where we address some mental health and is doing some other things. If you have any trouble with PTSD, we are starting a new group on that, where if we can help you, if there's something going on in your life, this community has got a lot of resources. Let's back you off the edge. There's always tomorrow. There's a better mission out there. We are providing a real passion in this Bitcoin space for you to get involved and get out of that nihilistic mindset. Like, the best days are in front of us. We are literally witnessing a birth of a new system that is decentralized, that is freer, that is bright orange. And like Natalie said in her speech, this is where we restore that person to person. We cut out that third party big brother, which I think we can all get on board with as guys that love America. We love our fellow man, and we love the idea of being self-sovereign and absolutely independent. So Natalie, thank you again from all of us here at Bitcoin Veterans for showing up, and great discussion. Alex, Jordan, Mike, Gabe, thanks again for being here. Can't wait to see you guys again next week. We will be here Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we are looking forward to it. Until then, we'll see you later. Peace.